Hello, I'm Maka Gogilashvili, PhD student at Tbilisi State University. In the Georgian reality, it's quite important to promote women's engagement from an economic perspective. Also, the idea of the gender equality is recognized by Georgian legislation instead of discrimination and stereotypical attitudes, still remain relevant in the country. According to the data from the National Statistic Office of Georgia, women outnumber men in terms of higher and vocational education. However, despite this, women make up 43% of the economically inactive population in Georgia. Women living in rural areas often face challenges such as limited access to education. Girls in rural areas frequently face restricted access to education and due to factors such as distance to schools, lack of proper infrastructure, cultural norms, and economic constraints. Access to health care, rural areas typically have fewer medical facilities, which can result in limited access to reproductive health services, mental care, and family planning resources. Gender-based violence, women in rural areas experience higher rates of domestic violence, sexual violence, and other forms of gender-based violence compared to those in urban settings. Economic environment. Women in rural areas often face the limited economic opportunities. Many are engaged in subsistence farming or work in informal sectors with little income or job security. Land rights and property ownership. In many rural communities, women have limited access to control over land and other productive resources due to discrimination or cultural practices. Limited mobility, cultural norms, and the lack of safe transformation infrastructure often restricts women mobilities in rural areas. This can limit the access to market services and economic opportunities. Political participation and representation, women in rural areas often underpressed in decision-making processes at both local and national levels. Cultural barriers, lack of education, and limited access to resources can hinder their environment in political processes. Also since 2012, state institutes have been established in the country with the goal of promoting rural environment. The overall environment situation for women has still not improved. Women's environment in agricultural programs is critically important, primarily because women make up nearly half of the labor force in Georgia and are significantly more unequal economic position compared to men. The vast majority of female farms do not view agriculture as a business activity. As a result, for many women, agriculture is merely as a subsistence economic. Despite the fact that the Georgian government has developed numerous programs to support agricultural production, the logistical infrastructure in rural areas remains under development. Female farms face numerous challenges, such as limited access to land. In many regions, women have restricted access to land ownership or control due to cultural norms or legal barriers. Access to agricultural inputs. Compared to men, women have a limited access to resources such as seeds, fertilizer, and tools. This lack of access hinders their productivity and efficiency in farming. Financial constraints, female farms often face difficulties in accessing credit, loans, and financial services due to a discriminational practice of lack of collateral. In many countries around the world, legislation still prohibits women owning and inheriting land. Also in our country, women have a legal right to inherit nearly half of the rural population. Believes that the real estate should be rightfully belong to sons. In Georgia, women own real estate at half the rate of men. The situation in rural areas is often further complicated by stereotypical attitudes. For example, they believe that the issues related to agriculture are a man's responsibility and the woman's environment is not desirable. Even those entrepreneurial women who have overcome the stereotypes and achieved success in agriculture still face a variety of challenges related to production and sales. Many of these challenges stem from systematic bias and social expectations. Access to capital, 58%, gender bias, 56%, limited networks, 50%, access to market information, 40%, stereotypes and misconceptions, 50%, access to market channels, 38%, and self-confidence and assertiveness, 40%. Among the challenges, key issue is the low level of interest investigating the girl in rural areas. It is largely due to the perception that girls represent a lower economic return compared to boys. It is expected that girls will move in their husband's family after marriage, while boys will remain in the parental home, inherit land and agricultural assets, support their parents in old age, and they have wives who will live in household and manage domestic responsibilities. Women's labor in rural areas is further burdened by living conditions that include care for multi-type children and family members with chronic illness. The situation is further complicated by infrastructural problems that hinder women's access to essential services such as preschool facilities, outplant medical care, and social services, combined with the need to balance caregiving and agricultural work, further complicates the partners and lives of rural women. One of the key steps toward improving women's access in financial resources is the inclusion of the women's line item in local budgets. In the case of Georgia, it can be said that in rural and regional settlements, women participation in social activities and decision-making processes is quite low. In many cases, women do not even perceive their role of necessary in these processes, which helps explain to low level of responsibility to state programs. Women environment programs aimed at when environment programs aimed at women's economic environment was developed, and developing countries broadly agree that autonomy is a necessary precondition for improving women's economical. In other words, if a woman does not feel that she's capable of doing something independently, it becomes very difficult to engage her in entrepreneurship programs. The example of Georgia is also worth considering, where established businesswomen come together in special networks, pay membership fees, and include small-scale women entrepreneurs with those networks. Women involved in such programs are often the most successful and realize their potential. As experience for various countries around the world demonstrated that many women have chosen to participate in program after establishing communication with successful beneficiaries. Women play a significant role in the full development of the economy. In a modern society, women will be able to make free and personal tailored life choices only if they are encouraged to embrace their experience and values. To address this challenge and the many obstacles that women face on an almost daily basis, the state needs to implement effective policies. However, it should be noted that similar initiatives implemented by government do not include strategies aimed at strengthening women's influence and public status, are largely social by nature. In rural areas, women have less access to information, innovation, and knowledge compared to men. Due to deeply rooted bias, the term farmer is often perceived as referring exclusively to men. In practice, within household farming, men are typically involved in agricultural activities that require technological knowledge and the operation of machinery, while women are mostly engaged in manual and labor-intensive tasks. Women have less access to technology, which may be partly due to the widespread stereotypes that machinery is a man's job. Rural women also face limited access to financial resources. Women are underpriced in cooperatives, both as members and as chairpersons. Also, Georgia's regional development strategy aims to promote the social and economic advancement of women's gender equality. Considerations are still not adequately reflected in laws and decisions, including the law of cooperatives. In reality, the development of women's entrepreneurial opportunities and activities lies in professional education. This is why it would be highly effective for local government and deliver vocational training courses directly within rural communities. Implementing politics such as childcare support, flexible working hours, and parental leave can help women balance caregiving responsibilities with professional activities. Reducing harmful gender stereotypes that hinder women's contribution to the economic and fostering inclusive attitudes is critical for creating a supportive environment for women's economic environment. Recognize the unique challenges faced by women in rural areas, such as limited access to resources, infrastructure, and implementing targeted interventions to address these barriers can help unlock the economical potential.
Thank you so much for this presentation.